I'm thrilled to have the opportunity today to introduce the latest executive coach in our series of interviews with successful executive coaches. I have Kelly Tweeddale with Break the Tape Leadership, who is a creativity and growth executive coach. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Yeah, Michael, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this too. Talk with you for some time now. So I'll just jump right into it since we can have a great conversation that is illuminating to the coaches that like to watch this channel. So my first question really is related to your background. You have a super interesting background for an executive coach. Many come from HR, consulting, corporate leadership positions, even healthcare. But your background is different. You were recently in executive positions with the San Francisco Ballet and the Vancouver Symphony. What led you from the arts to executive coaching?
Well, I would joke and say I needed to have the questions rather than the answers, but really it was the pandemic. I was in a point in my career where purpose and mission has always been important. The arts has been central to my life. And during the pandemic, all of that turned upside down. And the value of live performances became about keeping people safe and healthy. And the purpose and the mission of what I was called to do changed. And that's where I said, I want to be the person I didn't think I knew I needed when I was going through probably the most existential time in the arts in my lifetime. So that's what led me to executive coaching. Is I really felt like leaders needed something more.
Interesting. That is another example of one's professional life being turned over and changed through the pandemic. But now there are many people benefiting from the fact that you did make that pivot and make that change.
I benefited. I met people like you, Michael.
Oh, thank you very much. I know your practice is called Break the Tape Leadership. And it's been about 1.5 years now since you launched that practice. How would you say it's going in relation to where you might have had some goals in the beginning when you set out on your own?
Yeah, it's exceeded my expectations. Someone say then your expectations were too low, but I really wanted to kind of just feel my way through it. I've always been an analytical, very driven leader, and I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to really be a bit more organic. And so I did set some preliminary goals, and once those were met in I think it was month 3. I thought, okay, we need to amp this up a bit. But what I've noticed is, as a coach, giving myself time to grow into where I think I can have the most impact was really, really necessary for me. Because otherwise, anybody can show up to a client and ask a series of questions and do what we learn to do. But to have impact was really important to me. So taking my time to feel like, where can I have the most value, was really important. And I did that through a series of steps. And that was doing some networking, really asking for feedback from the people that I was coaching of what worked and what didn't, and really listening and being more intuitive of what was moving the conversation forward versus following the how-to that we all learn, don't ask, binary questions, and, all of that's in your brain, and you can't have impact if you're still in that learning mode about being perfect. So I allowed myself to be imperfect.
Wonderful. There's a lot of good advice in that answer, Kelly. I recently discovered that perfectcoach.com is available.
Oh,
there isn't anybody who aspires to be the perfect coach, though we do sometimes get a little caught up in our heads about trying to get close to perfect with how we handle a coaching conversation and so forth. So thank you for sharing that advice and the idea of asking your clients for feedback. think many coaches have trepidation around that. I mean, we all feel vulnerable to doing our best, and maybe asking for feedback is difficult, but it's such good advice as you're starting out, and really, regardless of where you are in your journey, it's something that I should do more often. So I appreciate hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
So then my next question is, looking back on the last year and a half, is there anything you would do differently if you could do it over again?
Yeah, you know what I would do differently? I was really protected of my Rolodex. That's an old term for my network.
Sure. I
My
remember it.
age here, yeah. But I like the idea of because again, it goes back to having the competency, and I didn't want to jump into my connections until I felt comfortable. And that for me, when I look back, was a hiding strategy. And if I was going to do it differently, I would lean full force into my closest connections, because once I did that, things started to really click. I got a lot of ideas of where I could help. I got a lot of feedback of what the pain points were in the industries that I really wanted to spend my time in. And not doing that until I felt like I was ready, I think was just procrastination. And I think one of the things that I did to become a creativity and growth coach, I did a series of interviews of both businesses and leaders that fit the profile that I really wanted to serve. And when I did that, I had a lot of usable information. And I let it sit, I let it sit for probably, I would say about 6 months. And I think I should have acted on it more quickly, because I was looking to, be more finessed. And my experience is you only get finessed through doing, not just waiting for, it's an aha moment. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's also good advice too. That I look back on my first few years, and I think that what I would do differently is create more content sooner. That I feel like I was fairly slow and late to creating my own content and helping people to understand what's my unique angle on at that time running a small business, because I was a business coach when I first started out. So it's good to look back and see how we might have done things differently. Now, currently, I know you do some work with the SBA as well as run your own executive coaching practice. And it's interesting because in my background, I worked with the SBDC for a few years as a consultant while I was running my business coaching franchise. How do you manage juggling working with an outside organization like SBA and what their demands are of you, and managing your own practice?
Yeah, here's what I love. So being a creativity coach and coming from the performing arts sector, there is no mission driven business more intent than a small business owner. You are close to what their purpose is, and that is very similar to my performing arts background, is that the show must go on no matter what, and what the deliverable is. But so when I work with cohorts, so I have a cohort of 24 right now. This is our second year working together in the Seattle area, and it's really as a coach, not consulting. So they have all the business advice, they have their learning modules, they have all of the expertise provided for them, but I really get to use my coaching skills, and it's coaching the cohort. So how do they learn from each other? What are their shared experiences? And so it's coaching and facilitating. Team coaching is what I would call it, the competency that we're familiar with. And it is that power of finding those connections that are like-minded, that they can not only affirm their own expertise, but find lived experiences. And as a coach, I get to facilitate the questions, facilitate what would have the biggest impact for a cohort rather than an individual. But then we also get to do individual coaching of the business leaders as well. So I don't really find it as a real like hard break from coaching because of how this program is structured.
Right.
And I think what has been really interesting this year, they have added a lot of incentives for the cohort. And these guys are driven. You know, we just got started, but Seattle is on the top of the pack right now. And it's really fun. It's really fun to see how quickly coaching conversations can help people move forward in their business.
It really sounds like a joy to be doing that work. I mean, I can just sense your energy and love for it, and I've seen that come through in your words too when you describe it in LinkedIn posts, etc. So it seems like it's not stressful to try and juggle that work and managing your own practice. There, while you may be working for a different organization, it's the type of work that you love to do. So it's complementary in that way. That's
Yeah.
terrific.
You know, one of the things that I say, and I have my own purpose statement and mission in what I do,
Mhm.
and you know, part of what I do is create agents of momentum. And so being able to work with this group and try things and see, you know, how they are becoming agents of momentum, they will end up with a 3-year growth plan. It is really fulfilling, but it also is fine-tuning my skills as well.
Exactly. And so you're getting paid to practice and produce great results for people who are super driven. That was one of the reasons I liked business coaching early on, because
Mhm.
working with people who are so passionate about their businesses is always fun and rewarding when they get tangible results through the work together. And you're in line with the trend in coaching, which is team coaching. You're
Yeah.
getting some great
Mhm.
skills there.
Mhm. And you know, the good news is that after the program ends, you know, I last year I ended up with, you know, several individuals that wanted to continue. And so
Mhm.
it's building my practice as those who raise their hand, who are ready for additional coaching one-on-one, come forward.
Terrific. And you're raising your fame in the area too, with groups of people.
Yeah.
So you're getting known faster by working with groups. So I just love how that's working out for you. You've
Yeah.
done something that is fairly unique in your first year as an executive coach, and that's to create your own framework. And most coaches may come to a point where they start creating their own material years into their practice. Can you tell me a little bit about your framework in brief?
Yeah, so I call it the tape framework, and it is really built on my 3 decades of working in creative industries. If you envision creative people coming together, and when I worked in opera, that is the big daddy of it all, is you have singers, you have orchestra, you have music, you have lighting, you have sets, you have everything you can imagine that have to come together on a common goal.
Mhm.
And so I became a real student of how creativity works. And creativity works differently, and it requires a different framework. And so the frameworks that we in business school have learned about, the MECE frameworks, the mutually exclusive, comprehensively exhaustive,
Mhm.
doesn't work in creativity, because
Mhm.
creativity is about it's about seeing the connections between many things.
Mhm.
And that is where I really wanted to have something that would let me know, someone who was looking for more ideas, innovation, where they were on a spectrum. So I created the tape framework, and it measures self-perception in 2 areas. Self-perception of how fast do you like to work? You know, how fast do you work on both the skill sets that you have? What skill sets are you ready to, you know, hit the ground running? And I use the pandemic as the fastest kind of innovation, when we didn't know hardly anything and everything was changing so quickly, and decision making was really different than if you were building a business, a family business that you were going to pass on to your heirs. You would build it differently, and you make decisions differently. So I asked a series of questions on skill sets, of how people were feeling about how prepared they were on skill sets, and also a series of questions on what kinds of connections they had, and what were their source groups. And this is just self-evaluation.
Mhm.
And then I map them out on a growth scale. So the skill sets that I've experienced, that you need in really fast growth are different than what you need slow and steady growth. And so I map it out. I also give them the option to do the same thing in the framework for their business or their organization. And we look at it. We look at, as a leader, this is where you're most comfortable right now. And this is where you feel like you may need a little bit more, I would say, amplification of connections or relationships. And we look at it as it overlays with their business as well. And the idea is not to give here's what you should do. It's to tee up the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What does this say to you? Where would you like to start? What would be most helpful? And then we talk about growth as it relates to creativity, because that's what I do. So it's really a place to start from. And then I'm working on a case study right now where I've been coaching a business and its leaders for 6 months. And we're going to do it again and see where they move from where their self-perception was at the beginning to the end. And they did it with their team, their employees as well. So it'll give me a lot of good information and how to use the time of coaching most effectively.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I've seen it iterate over time, and it's just fascinating to see how this is woven into your practice and supports your work as a creativity and growth coach to businesses. Looking at it from a business perspective, how has it helped to differentiate you from other coaches?
Yeah, I think it's something that I can bring to the table at the beginning, long before an engagement. Mm-hmm. So it really is something that I can offer benevolently, free, and give a sense of some things to think about. And so I think it tees up those people who really get excited about those two things coming together: more ideas, more innovation, and growing either as a leader or as a business. And so it just helps bring forward to me those people who are ready to have that conversation, and it gives us something to talk about. And I think that's me, and then I use other assessments just like any other coach would once we get into the coaching agreement and contract, and to amplify that. So I think it works well.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. It gives you some unique insights into your client in areas that you really care about. One of which is creativity. I know that's one of your core values. How has this focus on creativity helped you as a coach?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is that I think what it has helped me is really clarify what has always had me stand apart. As a leader, I was known for always doing things a bit differently. And I always knew that I was most excited in that creative stage. I always said I liked the messy stage, whether it was a building, it was before the architect designed the building, and before, when you put all the pieces together. I always knew that was where maybe the fuel of any project is framing that right and getting the right, big ideas clarified, was something that just I could do that all day long. And so when I thought about how do I become the person I didn't know I needed when I was out of ideas, when creativity was, I remember very clearly someone saying to me, hope is not a strategy. And to me, that was like the Antichrist. I mean, it was just like, when creativity, you have to think that and yeah, you put all the pieces, but hope is a driver to creativity. You have to have an inspiration, aspiration. And so when I realized I was empty, I really was eager to figure out, how do I get that back? And when I went through the coaching training, I was surrounded by people that weren't there for an agenda. They were there to help me get back on my game. And that was so powerful. That was so powerful. And so creativity, I'd say one thing today is creativity If I do my job well in my business, we democratize creativity. It is not something you're born with. It is a skill set like any other, and it shows up differently in different people. But my job is for you to connect with that and find it in yourself, or surround yourself with resources that make you, if creativity isn't your word, maybe it's innovation, maybe it is solutions, but it is the same kind of a secret sauce.
Yeah. And you are speaking my language, Kelly. I am so into creativity, and I like to talk to my son about continuous improvement.
Yeah.
Is you have to be creative to think about, how could I continuously improve on a process? Like, how do I make it better and better? I lead these in-person seminars for the Center for Executive Coaching, and every time I run the seminar, I try to make it a little bit different, a little bit better, and I'm pushing myself and also my team to think about ways to do so. Now, I personally feel creative. I feel creative. I appreciate creativity. I push to be creative. But I have met clients over the years who don't feel they're creative. I mean, I recall one in particular saying, I've never thought of myself as creative. How do you help those who don't think they're creative start to tap into that? One answer you've given is maybe use a different term, maybe use solutions or innovation. And are you more aligned with those terms? Do you have any other ideas?
Well, this is where I'll bring up the joy meter.
Okay.
Because I think creativity and joy can come together. So a lot of times I'll say, what brings you joy? How do you get that feeling of joy? What are the ingredients to joy? What if and I use the word hackathon, what if we do a hackathon to whatever you're trying to solve, or whatever you're trying to get more of in your life? What if we use what gave you joy, which you can name, and hackathon it? So to a new purpose. To me, that's creativity. You're repurposing something that you already know to solve a problem or a lack or a pain somewhere else. And so, yeah, you may not, it's okay. People don't have to use that word creativity. And I may not be the coach for them. I mean, I would say, really, quite honestly, if someone doesn't want change and doesn't want anything better and whatever, I may not be able to help, and that's okay. They may need someone with a different skill set.
Well, and that's why I think it's great that you call yourself a creativity and growth executive coach, which will immediately speak to some people and may not speak to everyone. So you're saying right away, these are the areas that I really specialize in. And if that's you, you'll know it when you hear those words, just like me. Like I would love to have a creativity and growth executive coach, just because of who I am and the way I'm wired, right? So I can see how it does speak to certain people. This has been so fun, Kayla. I really enjoyed this, and the time has flown by. I just have one last question now to ask you, and that is that if you have the ability to speak to a newer coach, and we have many through the Center for Executive Coaching, as you know, we continue to have new enrollees in our program. Do you have any advice for a new executive coach starting out with their practice on how they can get off to a great start like you did?
Yeah, let me say 3 with a bonus answer. 3 things.
All right.
One is I found the Profile XT really helpful for me. I scored really off the charts on independent, so it was really affirming that I could create my own business. I had a skill set; it was in my sweet spot. But that's not for everybody. So you decide whether you can learn more by being part of a coaching group, if you want your own business, or you want to be part of a platform, or do a combination of both. So really figure that out for yourself, because if your own business isn't your thing, it's going to take all your time figuring out how to run a business rather than do what you love. The number 2 thing is I still stay in close contact with many of the people I went through the program with, and we did coaching in the breakout sessions, and we did mentor coaching together. we still get together. We share our journeys with each other, and we
Mhm.
coach each other. So really take advantage of that learning and the people that you've surrounded yourself. That doesn't go away, but continue to do that. Third is it's going to take longer than you thought. Unless you're applying for a job where you're going to be, just hired right off the bat. But give yourself some grace and figure out how to use your skills so you don't lose them in whatever you're doing. And then my bonus thing is I did a pro bono coaching as my first client of a new executive in a sweet spot of nonprofit. And I did it because I wanted to really prove to myself that this is something that had equal value. And I just wasn't ready in my business to say, hang up my shingle. And that has been powerful. I went on to coach that business, facilitate board retreats, staff retreats, leadership retreats. And I continue to do business with that company based on that initial. So don't let anybody tell you that your time is too valuable not to volunteer for the right thing. What I did ask in that was for referrals and for amplification. And that was as valuable as having a first paid client.
Great. Three suggestions and a bonus suggestion too on top of that. Yeah. I particularly resonate with number 3, which is know that it might take you a little longer than you expect. That was certainly true in my world, and I'm glad that I remained gritty and committed and stuck with it, because it sure was worth it. And this time with you, Kelly, sure was worth it. Thank you very much for spending this time with us today and answering these questions so openly and generously. There's a lot of great advice here that I know many coaches will appreciate hearing and sharing with others.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It was a great pleasure, and I wish you the best of success going forward.